Okay, we are going to show bolt extraction with a technique that we've adopted here in Central Texas. Basically, we're going to show extraction of a Powers or Rawl style 5-piece. That's comprised of a 3/8. This is a 1/2-inch bolt, concrete sleeve anchor, but really it's a 3/8 bolt that goes through this. There's a washer on it, which in this case is going to be a climbing hanger. There is a spacer sleeve, a compression bushing, an expansion sleeve, and a cone. So we'll show you how to get this back out of the rock. So a couple considerations is that we are doing this in 5,000 pound, 5,000 PSI concrete, and we're doing it with a new bolt. So conditions are pretty optimal if you're up on the wall and you're struggling or dealing with a rusty bolt. It might not be the same, but for all intents and purposes, this is the process. We are using some specialized tools. The first being these deep well sockets. They're made by
Gray Pneumatic. Great, gpsupply.com.
And we have a 9/16 deep well socket and an 11/16 deep well socket. We also have a ratcheting tap, and this is 7/16. This really helps speed things along. But the interesting part about this whole system is these pullers here, and we're basically using all thread, 7/16 all thread, 3/8 all thread, 6 inches long, and this is a fender washer, a thruster or a thrust bearing, another washer, and a series of nuts. So we'll get to it. The first thing you want to do is take the 3/8 inch bolt that goes through this out, and then we'll take the hanger off. So what you can use, the nice part about this whole thing is that you can use power tools. Again, you can use an SDS hammer drill, but for the purposes of this demonstration, we're just using one of these impact drivers. So here we go. We'll get rid of the hanger, and then what we want to do is create separation between this cone and this sleeve. So we're going back into the cone, and just with our hammer we'll tap it. And hopefully we create enough separation between the sleeve and that cone, and then we'll come back and take the bolt out. And next thing is to extract this spacer sleeve and the compression bushing. And there's other ways to do this, but what we're using is basically just the tap that we have on hand. Let's see if we can get this thing to go the right way we want it to go. Then you can just pull it out like that, and then
we're lucky here because the conditions are prime. But it works either way, even in a crappy bolt.
Right, and this next part is pretty much the hardest part, and I'll let Matt demonstrate that. And what slows this process up quite a bit is getting this expansion sleeve out. Again, keep in mind this is a piece of rolled metal. That you might be able to see a seam that goes through that. And so you really are fighting expansion into rock, especially if you're dealing with softer rock like, or more porous rock like limestone or sandstone. This can be challenging. So I think that we'll be able to demonstrate a pretty efficient way to do this, especially if you're hanging in your harness.
Alright, so take this little piece again. It's like Chris was saying, you got this rolled steel here, so the thing to keep in mind is if you tap into this thing, this is sized, the 7/16 14 thread is sized just to be in between. This is, I think the thickness of this is like 1/16 inch rolled steel, so you only have one 30 seconds play to get your threads tapped into here. And beyond that, if you go too far with the tap, you actually risk kind of, when you get this all thread in there, kind of expanding the sleeve even further, and you're kind of fighting against yourself. So usually you want to try to get the tap just a little bit past the little triangular slots here, not too much further. Now, later on down the road, if you're ever struggling, and this has happened, you know, this isn't always a guaranteed process. Sometimes the bolts are really rusted, the rock is terrible, you got seepage everywhere. You do whatever it takes to make it happen. Sometimes you got to go deeper so you can get more threads, and sometimes they pop because this thing opens up. But for the most case, this has proven to be a pretty good process for us. So I'm just going to get started. Start tapping in here. Yeah, should be good enough. Pop this thing out. Now, of course, we're working vertically down, so gravity is pulling all these threads that, or the metal shavings that we produced down into the cone, which can be a problem later. So usually you want to try to blow that stuff out if you get a pump, tube, anything, you want to blow it out. Alright, so now what we've got here is the 7/16 14 off thread. Like Chris was saying, this is 6 inches long, which is kind of nice for the depth of these ultra deep sockets. It's long enough to be able to drive these nuts basically all the way down, and enough to go into the hole and actually thread into this and pull it out. So, you know, maybe 5.5 works. Who knows? We haven't perfected that, but 6 inches worked pretty well. And one thing you want to keep in mind is if you're getting all thread, you want to get high grade, like grade 8 steel, and you want to keep these threads clean and constantly take a dye to them after you've worked. You know, in the field, you're going to get dirt and rock and everything in there, and that can muck you up and kind of botch an operation in the field. So you want to keep this handy and be able to keep these threads clean. We just did this before, so it's a pretty good situation. But something to keep in mind, getting 7/16 and so 7/16 14 and a 3/8 inch die handy. It's pretty nice. So first thing, we've already got these nuts jammed. It's going to help us to thread into here. And there we go. Because it's jammed, we can drive this in a little bit. Remember, you don't want to go too far. That might work. And you're going to take off that top nut. Keep that handy. Make sure if you're in the field you have a bag, something to drop this into. There's still a few moving parts in this thing that can float free, and you don't want to drop those if you're several pitches up, or you keep several handy. But now we're just going to drive this down, and if things go well, the threads are going to lock into that tapped sleeve, and it's just going to suck it out of the hole. And one thing I didn't mention is this fender washer is oversized a bit, so that it can feed. It'll actually suck it out of the hole enough where you can then grab it with a pair of pliers and fish the rest of it out. Yep, we got success. All right, we're gonna take this out. Then we're gonna put this nut back on so we can undo the all thread. Jam these together again. Put that plier down there. Jam these together again, just a little bit. All right, good. And undo that. This is good. And yeah, sometimes you just use this to wiggle it out, but for this case, we're just going to grab it. We don't care. There you go.
Damn.
first sleeve down. Put this to the side, make sure nothing falls apart.
And
Usually we have a third nut and keep everything just locked in so these don't go flying down. That would really suck.
And just for efficiency, again, we have 2 setups, but really
This
you
is
only
the smaller
need
size, the 3/8 16 drive. Now the pain for this is that sometimes we get a bowl here. Once you've separated this cone in the hole and it's just floating free, it can do all sorts of things. And sometimes the most painful part of this procedure is actually getting the cone, because it may be sitting there at an angle, or it may have debris in it, may be sitting there for all these years having corrosion. So sometimes just the process of getting this re-threaded can be a little tricky. So sometimes you want to just, once you start getting this thing, you may take a hammer and try to right it up. And if you have a little light, you can look inside and see if that thing's looking at you in the eye or if it's kind of cattywampus. For this case, we're going to try. It looks like threads are going pretty well. Again, we're in a lab environment here, so we have things working in our favor. But now we're taking the 9/16 deep socket. Thread this in a little bit more. Don't have to go too far because it's a pretty short piece of equipment. Again, take off that sham nut. Keep that handy. And drive this home. Again, if you situate this, it'll come out of the hole. Ta-da! There you have it. That's how you do it down in Texas, y'all. Be sure to celebrate.